I'd like to open our meeting this afternoon by just reminding what this 2 o'clock session is for, and that is to advance the conversation about the day reporting center. We've all had time to, through the interview process and time to review all the differences between the vendors, and we are coming upon our budget season, and so we also had some conversation about maybe being able to implement by the end of the year or start the new year, that kind of a timetable. So this is kind of an important meeting to try to get a consensus, and would be the hope, or at least some dialogue, pros, cons of the different vendors, and I'll just open it up to the judge.
Well, the first thing that I wanted to do is I wanted to apologize to Dave Arnold, because when we were talking among ourselves on Friday, part of our discussion was, oh my gosh, maybe we should have had Dave more directly involved in these discussions. And I don't want to put Dave on the spot. I don't think Dave's opposed to the day reporting center concept. I didn't think so, based on a prior conversation that we had. But I really feel bad about that, Dave. I really feel like maybe we should have had a little more in-depth conversation. I think you understand where we were coming from with regard to the proposal generally, but I didn't want to ignore you. I mean, because I think, frankly, in terms of success, it takes buy-in. It'll take buy-in from Dave as the district attorney, and buy-in by the courts in particular, and probation services, and you folks, of course. And I think you've got us, of course. I hope Dave's not opposed to it, and and our hope is that we can reach some, I guess, understanding here today about which way we're headed. We actually met really and kind of looked at this as a pros and cons kind of thing as we looked at each of the 3 vendors and the proposals that they had offered to all of us. And there were pros and cons we felt for each of them. When we looked at the proposal from the Youth Advocate Program, when we looked at it from the pro standpoint, we've had a good experience with Youth Advocate, with our juvenile center. No problems, no insurmountable problems, and we've had a very good experience there. We believe that they have good community connections. They have buy-in on CBT and using the risk and needs assessment. We thought there were some cons, if you will. We believe that if YAP would be the vendor that we would go with, that it would take a lot more of direct involvement by probation services, really, in terms of oversight. This isn't the kind of program that the Youth Advocate program has experience operating, and we believe that they would be looking for a lot more direction from us, and maybe we don't have the time, we don't have the staff, maybe we don't have the expertise to offer that kind of direction. We also weren't sure about what the location might be, and because of that, we did have a question mark with regard to costs. We felt that until there was some real decision with regard to where the center might be located, it would be a little bit hard to get a grip on what the actual costs were going to be. When we looked at PCS, PCS obviously has a location ready to go. We view that as a very positive thing, right downtown. I think a location that, at least based on their presentation, could potentially be up and running in a relatively brief period of time. Room for expansion. I recall as they gave their presentation with regard to that physical location, there was a basement area that could be used. That's not part of the original plan, but that would be available. PCS, obviously, a Lebanon community-based organization, and someone that's quite familiar to us. I believe as well, when we looked at PCS from the con standpoint, I think it was pretty clear in their presentation that they were looking for direction from us too. They were looking for us to tell them how they should run this day reporting center. And frankly, again, I think that's more than we might be able to do at the beginning. Again, the question whether we have the manpower, whether we have the expertise to provide that kind of actual direction that they're looking for from a programming standpoint as well. So we viewed that as a negative. We also do have a concern, although I think they attempted to alleviate this concern, with PCS being involved heavily in treatment and counseling, that it may take the other treatment providers out of the mix. You know, they indicated that that would not be the case, that they would not see themselves as someone who would be providing treatment across the board. But we have a little bit of an issue about that. I mean, because they would be the one running the center. There's a convenience right there, they're right there, and that might put the other two main providers here in Lebanon County behind the eight ball a little bit. And we don't really want to do that because we believe that we have a great interaction with all of those providers. So we view that as a little bit of a negative. You know, it could be, you know, familiarity breeds contempt a little bit too. You know, they know us, we know them. That can be a good and a bad thing depending on what history has been. When we looked at the GEO proposal from a pro standpoint, obviously their experience with running the kind of day reporting center that we're really interested in having is preeminent. They have, I believe, 70 programs. We've all seen one of their programs or two of their programs. I know Sally's seen both the Dauphin County and Franklin County. I made the trip to Franklin County. I know the commissioners have been exposed to those programs as well. And that experience, I don't think you can discount that. They are someone who's fully schooled and experienced in running day reporting centers. They know what is needed, and they've shown, I think, by their track record that they can do it in an efficient and effective way. I believe they could hit the ground running, as I believe they described it to us. I think they talked about potentially a 60-day window in which they could be up and running and ready to go. From a programming standpoint, they make use of things that we are quite cognizant of in probation services and well aware of the benefits. They use the carry guides. They use cognitive behavioral therapy. They're quite familiar with the LSIR, which we use, of course. And so those kinds of things we view as extreme positives in terms of being able to mesh where we are right now in probation services and where we hope to be with the center. Some negatives, though, about GEO as well. Of course, the cost situation. I think when we looked at the three proposals, they were the highest in terms of cost. They're not an agency or an organization that's really familiar with our community in terms of having those kind of community connections that we see both with the Youth Advocate Program and PCS. History there for those two organizations that's lacking with GEO. And of course, the final thing that I guess I viewed as the negative was we're not sure where they would be. They've looked at a couple of different locations. I think they know what we're thinking about in terms of location, but that location hasn't been firmed up or established. So that's kind of what we came up with, I think, from a pros and cons standpoint. There may be some things that I missed. Sally?
Definitely the referral to the various different providers that are already established in the community. We talked about that and with consideration to the GEO group. I believe they did mention during their presentation a couple things. One, that they would be hiring from within our community, which we thought was important and considered that to be a pro. Two, that they would be making direct referrals to the already established treatment providers, whether that's drug and alcohol treatment providers, mental health treatment providers that provide career services and educational services within our community. Our office does have established connections with those as well. So because it would be a collaborative relationship, I wasn't looking at that as necessarily a negative thing. I was looking at that as those things as positives.
So how about from you, Andrea? Did I miss?
I don't
anything?
have anything additional that
well.
needs to be noted.
So when we looked at the three proposals, and there are some other issues that we talked about. One of those was a staffing issue. I think when we have looked at the possibility of having a day reporting center, it's been clear to us that our involvement in that day reporting center cannot be assumed by the current staff level that we have at probation services. I mean, you're talking about potentially, hopefully removing 100 or more people from the prison, people that are going to be in this center, and maybe even a higher number. And probation services is going to have to have staff to oversee that group of people. Now, those are people that we're not overseeing right now because they're in prison. So when we look at this proposal, I think from our standpoint, we need to get that out there, that we're looking at, I think, a minimum of 2 additional staff members that would staff the day reporting center and work within the day reporting center with this group of people that we're going to have there. I think the GEO folks acknowledge that. They I think, understand that and get that, but I don't want that to be a surprise or a point of contention. It might be a point of contention, but I don't want it to be a surprise. I think we would need that to adequately perform the service and services that we hope to be able to do.
In either way, there are other things to discuss with that. We did have the pretrial diversion grant that was brought before the Board of Commissioners, and I know John's been in contact with PCCD. It looks like that is being considered favorably. So at least from the door, one of those probation positions may be a position, I guess what I'm trying to say is we may not need to do 2 up front, because that particular grant may be able to cover one of the probation positions for the offenders that are in the program on bail or pretrial. If that makes sense.
And again, we're looking at, as you folks know, a broad-based center where we're talking about people who have not yet gone into jail, diverting people who might be in jail because they can't post bail, diverting them to the day reporting center, having the day reporting center available as perhaps a re-entry tool for those that are in prison, and perhaps have those folks be released from prison sooner, if you will, than they normally would. Also having it be a location where folks who we now send to jail because they're not paying their child support would also be dealt with, and provide the kind of aid that those people need. Maybe it's in finding a job, those kinds of things. So we're talking about a broad-based for folks who go into jail, as they're coming out of jail, and to avoid going to jail is our hope.
Yeah, I do have a couple. The first would be a question, Judge. You indicated that perhaps Dave should have been involved earlier in the discussion. What discussions have you had with the district justices?
Well, I've spoken with our district justices somewhat at length about this program, about this proposal, and about my expectation of how they will respond to the existence of the center in terms of the bail situation. I think it was favorably received by all of our MDJs. I think our MDJs are dealing with a group of individuals that they feel that they have to put in jail because there's no other option, and that this will give them an option. If they're assessed, they're going to get treatment or counseling right away. That they view that as a positive thing, as opposed to putting them in jail because of some concerns about drug use or alcohol use or whatever it might be. So I think really across the boards, their response has been a positive response to what we're
well, the reason I asked that question is I did have discussion with at least one of the district justices who did not sound favorable at all. So, and of course, you can't account for that, nor can I.
Yeah.
The other,
I have a little more control over them. Is all I was saying.
I understand.
Okay.
Of course, the money is a major consideration for me, and particularly since the state legislature in their wisdom decided to cut the reimbursement for judges' salaries by $10,000 each under the new budget, and the additional positions that we're talking about here. I think we really need to, I don't want to select a substandard program, but the difference in pricing is significant, and some of those auxiliary costs could be compensated in this selection that we make here.
Well, I would hope that we wouldn't do that either. I would hope that we would not opt for a lesser option because of that concern. That's a decision I think that you folks will make.
Your Honor, obviously, we just came back from the County Commissioners Association, and I think Jamie was going to give you a copy of the Behavioral Health Task Force. Did you get that?
I don't think I received that.
Okay, well then I will share this copy with you.
You said the GEO update. I didn't get that. You
Yeah, it was in the Lancaster Constables thing, I think I sent up. I don't know.
Yeah, I did get that.
Okay, well then I will give
This I did not receive.
I will give you my copy. There's also an executive summary. I didn't read the whole study. I did read the executive summary. And there's some points in here that they're suggesting counties should explore memorandum of understanding with Social Security Administration to submit SSI applications prior to release. Now, obviously that's from jail, but it also talks about the Medicaid and things like that. So one of the questions, maybe they said it and I have, is were they going to assist, like say they're coming, you say they go to jail for a short time, are they going to assist our local residents with reestablishing their Medicaid and their SSI?
I would say that, yes, in conjunction with our reentry coalition. One of the other things that's going on in our community, is I think you folks are aware, I know Commissioner Phillips is well aware of that, is that we are establishing a reentry coalition, which we believe will work hand in hand with the Day Reporting Center. That kind of issue is specifically addressed within the reentry coalition about making sure that folks, before they are released from jail, are
Your Honor, if I
updated.
could, I think what the Commissioner's speaking to is suspension of benefits based upon, or termination,
Yes,
in
yeah.
relation to
Yeah.
termination of benefits. Because of the recent change in language, they are suspended to be re-entered into the system because the old way was their benefits were terminated when they came to jail. And when they actually got back out, there was such a long layover until they could actually recoup some type of benefits, which would affect drug treatment, things like that. And I think that's what you're speaking to, is more
Yes.
clarification.
And you're going to my point exactly. When we have people incarcerated, it's 100% funded from county taxpayer dollars. Now, I know there's some reimbursement for the drug and alcohol and mental health. We're trying to work through that. But I'm looking at this program too. Will we be able to recoup some of the money from reimbursements? Because we're looking at a $500,000 a year program. We can't put that all on the backs of taxpayers locally with real estate. And I'm looking at how we're going to fund it, because I think it's an excellent idea. And they go to funding in here a little bit about trying to work with counties and figure out how much they're saving long-term because there's less recidivism and that sort of thing. But I found it enlightening, and I'd like to share it with you if you haven't received it.
Okay, yeah, I'd like to see that for sure.
Could you expand on what you said about recouping costs from Medicaid? If I heard that correctly.
Well, what happens, they have to have a home plan and things, but if their Medicaid is gone and they have no way to live, then they end up back in jail because they committed crimes and they have medical insurance. I don't know it. It's very complicated. I don't know all the stuff.
The services would have to be eligible to meet treatment criteria under performed care and other such, like medical assistant funding. So if you're in alcohol treatment that they would be referred out to, would be something that would be covered under certain review, either through the single county authority or through their medical assistants or so forth, and some of their behavioral, if it's mental health and so forth. There are also grants that cover some of the career link services and the educational services that come into prison and that we refer people to. But they would all have to be programs that are eligible for that funding, and I'm not sure that there's a guarantee. I mean,
Well, is there someone who can help us do the math to find out what the real cost to the county taxpayers would be versus being able to use some services that are reimbursed, whether it's through drug and alcohol or through mental health, or through Medicaid, or whatever it might be. Or if there's some copay that's involved. I know we discussed that at a previous meeting, and the judge wasn't real happy about that, but even something to show buy-in, something small, you know. Those are the kinds of questions I have. I'm in favor of trying the program, but I'd like to know how we're gonna pay for it.
Do you have a vendor selection in your mind?
Oh, well, when it comes to vendor selection, I heard and acknowledge everything, Your Honor, that you said. Some of the things I had pulled out was that the two different baselines. One, this GEO used Washington State, and PA Counseling used Kutztown University. It seemed to me the baseline from Kutztown would be more regional, more local. Does that make sense? As opposed to using something from Washington State. What are the differences between the two studies? I don't know. I am not, I don't have the expertise to discern that, but I just picked up on those two different studies, and I don't know the differences between them and what their similarities are. I did like on the GEO that there's no aftercare cost. On the other hand, when it came to PA Counseling, and Youth Advocate was below, so that's why I'm not saying this at this time, but PA Counseling promised us 68 hours, where GEO only promised us 55. And they both had similar capacities at 111. And GEO said, well, we have to pick certain days that we would have the treatment center open. PA Counseling said they would do treatment 7 days a week, and they would treat the whole offender. There were certain things that really, because the community connection, that was making me lean to PA Counseling versus GEO because of those things that I've been saying. That's my crib notes that I took. I have lots more, but that's the short version.
Well, Commissioner Litz's assessment of $500,000 is going to fall short, especially taking into consideration 2 additional probation. We're looking at $750,000 to $1 million in actual costs for this program. I would be very comfortable with PA Counseling, knowing their reputation. I think they're interested in serving, and I think they would, and I talked a little bit about that when they presented here, the opportunity to customize the program. They're in the business, and certainly all the information that GEO has available to them, that would be accessible to PA Counseling. And with this program will be, at least initially, a huge burden on the taxpayers of the county. I don't think we'd be losing anything by offering it to PA Counseling, and especially since they're an in-county business, there's a lot to be said for that as well. So that would be my pick.
As for me, I similarly gravitated toward PCS because of familiarity with them and the budget friendliness of their proposal. And also, GEO, though they can hit the ground running, it's kind of like some is better than none. If you can develop a program, if it takes an extra 6 months or so to get up to speed, is that really, since we have no program at all now, that's where I was coming from in terms of they have a good track record with the county. And again, my information is not as close, I'm sort of in the bleachers looking at this thing. You guys are on the front line of it, so your perspective would be certainly more valid than mine, except I'm looking at the budget, I'm looking at only what I know as far as their ability to do well with us in the programs that we have already, and feeling that since we have no program, what would it hurt to take a flyer on them, knowing their track record and the fact that we can afford it better, and get it up and running, and maybe if it took longer, that would be a sacrifice or a compromise, but it would be easier on the taxpayer, and we get there, it might take a little longer. That was sort of the gist of what I distilled this thing down to. But GEO, obviously, programs they have throughout the country and so on, all speak for themselves that they're in this business already. But I did see a marked improvement. The last presentation from PCS I thought was, it was very credible. And so that gives me a sense of comfort with them. But that we're gonna have to then maybe talk a little further about how we get there if we approaching it from different points in terms of budgeting and so on.
Could I add one other thought? As county commissioners, we're concerned about risk and risk to taxpayer money, and reading the information that we most recently received and Jamie forwarded to us yesterday, I think, from GEO. One thing, they did identify a site, Judge, in that letter.
Yes, ultimately, yeah.
Yeah, but there's a significant risk, more risk to the county with GEO than with PA counseling, and that involves primarily the building. They made it very clear that, and we, as well recommended as GEO is, we may get into this and find out, you're not happy with what GEO's doing, and if we did break contract with them, we would be responsible for prorated part of the building renovations that they're going to do, and we would also be captive to paying for the rent for the remainder of the contract. So from a risk standpoint, I think PA counseling offers a whole lot less risk to us than GEO.
I did have one other question. Sally, I don't know if this is to you or not. PAYS, PAYS survey, have you ever heard or used that?
The paper, no, that's something that's completed by the school districts. And I think it's facilitated, I want to say Drug and Alcohol Commissioner.
Okay, because the closing statement on this whole study on the executive summary says county commissioners should become familiar with the PAYS survey and develop strategies to discuss incorporating the survey into local criminal justice planning strategies. And I had never heard of it, so.
Our county human services departments, NHADEI and
use it.
David, any comment?
No, sir. No.
No.
John?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Sure.
Yeah, I missed the YAT and PCS, so this question may have been answered then, but my recollection back to the initial presentations was that there were some more unknown cost factors with the PCS. What came to mind was drug testing, things like that.
They did address that.
They did. You're feeling more comfortable that there were solid.
Oh, yeah.
Solid
As it
numbers.
was 80 years ahead of where they were.
Yeah, they explained that to me where they came in under this.
Workshop idea,
Okay, thank you.
yeah.
I do have one other thing. If the math is right, and I'd have to go back and redo it with a calculator, but at $15.25 for PCS, 100 people, I think comes to $556,625 a year, which is where I got the rough $500,000 estimate. That would be $46,385 a month. These are just wrong numbers, I believe. But if you go to the 68 minimum people, it probably is the high end of $28.25. So therefore, that would come to $701,165 a year, which is $150,000 more than treating 100 people, or $58,430 a month, or $12,000 a month more. So I think that if we do choose Pennsylvania counseling, we have to make sure that we're not, there should be a maximum that we're not paying more for less people because they'd be getting more money in and doing less work. Does that make sense?
68's not the minimum, 68's the number of hours per week that they would provide.
Okay, I thought that would, I knew they had, oh, the minimum was 40, I apologize. But I had 100, and it's 111. But,
So if
but,
you
but,
used 40, you
yeah,
have to use 40 hours.
Right.
If you used 68.
I did. But somehow, the principle would still be the same. Is there a point that we don't pay more for less work? So I think we should do that math before we sign a contract, if we go with them and carry it out.
Well, there would be a lot to do with your contract.
Yeah.
No matter which provider. I mean, I'm sure Geo has a boilerplate starting contract, and you know, they've been through this many, many times, so they probably have something that's almost ready to go, unless you differ with something.
Just remind me, we're both 3-year contracts.
I think PCS also asked for a 3-year
Yes,
contract
yeah.
because they would have to do renovations to the building.
And I think the youth advocate program was kind of not defined in terms of length, but the other two were 3 years.
And that was part, I guess, the other side of this thing. County's 200 years old. In the scheme of things, if you enter in with PCS and they can't ramp up over that period of time, we've at least improved some lives and made a dent in some of this area for Lebanon County. Then we have to rethink it for the second 3 years. At least we've done something in the right direction. I'm just concerned about having a vendor come in with higher costs just to start out. And the trade-off is the experience, but also they can hit the ground running, and it may take a few more months for PCS to get up. But their track record would say, at least, again, you guys are the frontliners on this. I'm getting mine secondhand, that they do quality work. Yes.
If I could just address one comment, it was made, Commissioner Litz made it today, it was made before, we sort of, I don't want to say we joked about it, there was a comment about a comparison to central booking in that, Commissioner, you said, how are we going to pay for this? And there was some talk about copay, maybe other means, I'm not sure, of getting, recouping some of the cost, but the comment was made the last time we were together, I think, referred back to central booking. Central booking was originally, I believe, sold, so to speak, as going to pay for itself. That has never happened. I'm not sure anyone sitting at this table expects that it will ever pay for itself. It's a cost that is part of the process, and sometimes you get paid for those assessments and those co-pays, and sometimes you don't. So I just want to be really cautious about not starting off under the assumption that this will pay for itself, because this is just another way of putting someone through the process. It's they can go for bail, they can go to prison and be eligible for bail.
Payoff would be more outcomes-based than...
Yes, I think the payoff comes when and if the recidivism goes down, and when and if the costs at the prison go down. It's hard to say, well, the population at the prison went down by 50, so we're going to no longer need 1 supervisor and 20 COs. That remains to be seen. So I think this really is a long-term thing, and then the very long term is the society benefit, because you break the cycle, and that's a cliche, but you break the cycle of generations going back to prison, because you've gotten to someone maybe in their teens or their 20s before that behavior is passed on and the cycle is broken. So I'm just very sensitive to that, because in my entire time here at the county, I think almost every budget season I've heard about central booking not yet paying for itself, and the yet is what concerns me if we start this off with a, when's it going to pay for itself?
And I
That's my
respect
soapbox.
I respect what you're saying, but I was looking for some buy-in, because somebody will say, oh yeah, I'll do it, and just like at Renaissance, if they're not really participating, they're kicked out kind of thing. You know, the first step to me, it could be nominal, $5 a day, some buy-in that they're here because they really want to be. And then, also, it's a privilege to be able to do this program versus going to jail. Who wants to sit in a little room all day long if you can be learning and growing as an individual and come out of it clean with no record, no criminal record? Then it won't hurt you when you go to apply for jobs and things like that. You're getting treatment. You don't have that criminal record. So all those things combined make this a really good thing to look at to make it work somehow. And I'm just looking for some help for paying for it, that's all.
I just have something to say. I certainly understand and appreciate the Commissioner's concern about the cost comparison between the three programs. And I want you to please believe that I do appreciate that. From someone who came through the development of the juvenile day treatment program from the very ground up, I understand the work that's involved in developing a new program for this county, and the efforts and time that went in to the development and establishment and implementation of that program. We are 2.5 years post our initial first day of opening, and you know, this year we were making modifications. We have a probation officer that's assigned to that program. I have the deputy director who spends a lot of time out of that program in the interest of collaboration. You know, we went to Ohio, we checked to see what their program was like in Ohio. There's a lot of work involved. Our adult, and I want to echo what the judge said earlier, our adult unit staff, over 50% of our staff have less than 5 years of experience. We have a very green staff. I think Audrey would, if she were able to speak, she would tell you how much time. Audrey's working on Saturday mornings with one of our staff. That's how much dedication it takes to train new officers. So when the judge mentioned, we don't have, it's not that we're not interested in, we don't have the time to handhold a new program to get this up implemented into development for the next 2.5 years. Our staff is too green to do that. So I think that's one of the interests that we had with the GEO group. You know, they can come in, and I don't think we can underestimate and undervalue the appreciation of this is a program that they can come in and start up. We will not have that with either of the other two programs.
I respectfully heard that to address your concerns on that, they hired Jeff Imboden, who is extremely skilled and would be able to fill in those kinds of things. And he would be advising them to get the program up and running. Is the confidence not there that Jeff has the ability to do that? I don't know.
I don't think that Jeff was sold as the, the offsetting.
Yeah, I don't actually know if Jeff has any experience with day reporting centers myself. I really don't know that. I mean, I know he has lots of experience in the field, in the probation field, obviously, because of his history, but direct experience about day reporting centers, I don't know that if he has any at all. I really don't know that.
But our staff doesn't either, but I'm just talking about the implementation and getting things up and running. I thought he was hired to help with that process. Was I misinformed?
What I heard her say was he was hired as an evidence-based practice consultant. I believe that's what she said.
Yeah,
and Jeff is working out at our Crossroads program, as are a number of the other staff that were mentioned that would be working with the day treatment or the day reporting center. They're working out at their full-time positions out at our Crossroads program.
Maybe
Maybe
I need to get clarification on that
Yeah, I
then.
don't think he's going to have the, I wouldn't.
I thought he was going to relieve staff of that duty.
I don't think he's thinking that he's going to have that kind of commitment. That's my.
Yeah, I didn't think that was it either. Again, I agree with Sally. I think he was hired as an EBT consultant, because he's EVP, excuse me, he's familiar with those things. Maybe they have bigger plans for him.
I just have to ask because it was something that I interpreted, and obviously somebody else interpreted it differently, so I have to get clarification.
Well, where do we go from here then? Do we want to each look at the numbers from our end, especially again, to see what we have a way of doing this, with what you recommend?
Well, I'm not convinced that bringing in a canned program is going to necessarily meet all of our needs. In fact, I don't think that's the trend with things not only like day reporting centers, but other places where you bring someone in to provide services. And what works in Franklin County, and incidentally it's not working all that well there, or what works in Dauphin County isn't necessarily what's going to work here. And I really don't think that with a professional company like PA Counseling that, you know, Sally, that you're gonna have to be holding their hand. I think you'll be able to make suggestions, and they will probably be more responsive than Geo to your suggestions. So I'm really, really concerned about the cost of this thing, and I'm a realist. I'm just as Jamie pointed out, I don't expect that we're going to have probably ever a huge financial advantage here. So the advantage is going to be in the success of the program, and perhaps somewhere down the road, after I'm no longer a commissioner, we might be able to avoid building an addition on the prison or something like that. But I don't expect to see reduction in staff at the prison this year or next year or the year after that, if it ever happens. So you know, to me, the fact that we're sitting here as a board of commissioners being willing to find $500,000, $750,000 for a new program like that, I think that should mean a lot to the courts and to the probation. And I think we should be able to make a determination in whether we're going to have an instant Cadillac or whether we're going to buy a Buick and have it tuned so that it does the best job we can here in Lebanon County.
And I appreciate that, Commissioner. I think you should know, coming from me, that my enthusiasm for us moving forward and establishing a day reporting center is in no way related to who we're selecting as who's going to be the vendor for that program. Despite how I might feel about pros and cons about the various groups, my enthusiasm is not dampened. Let's say if you pick this vendor as opposed to this vendor, if it appeared that I favored this vendor and you selected another vendor, my enthusiasm for this is not impacted by that. I think whatever the decision is, we will do our best, our absolute best, to make it a success. And if it takes more involvement at the front end by us, we'll do that. But you know, I don't want you to think that I'm less enthusiastic or we are less than enthusiastic about this, because we're not.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I was assuming that you would be making the pick, and then we would decide, do we take it or leave it? That's right.
Well, you know, I never knew. To be honest with you,
So that's what, you know, because of you being the experts in the field, and then you knowing what challenges we have on the finances and other ways, having come through what we've come through the last few years. But if you're, you know.
Well, if you're putting me on the spot and saying to me, Judge, if you were picking one of these three, who would you pick? I frankly would pick Geo because of my confidence in them, because of their years of experience, because they have the expertise to come in, hit the ground running, have the program running. They know from a programming standpoint what is needed. But of course, my decisions aren't always related to cost either. I don't know that.
Ours have to be a blend.
But I'm not trying to be irresponsible either. It's just that when I look at the pros and the cons, I look at the other two programs or the other two vendors, as groups that we would have to, I think, wean and educate through this process. And I think what you get with GEO is somebody that knows the business, somebody who's been in the business, knows the business, and doesn't really need us to tell them how to operate the program. I think they would be receptive to discussions about the program, but they don't need us to direct them how they should run this program because they have experience. And I think you pay for that experience.
So let us confer.
Okay.
But that's, I was sort of under the impression that you would make your recommendation and we would take it or leave it based on our ability to fund it. But sort of I'm hearing, if we pick what we can afford and what we think we can afford.
Well, again, I feel strongly enough about the benefits or the potential benefits of a day reporting center for our community and the folks that come through our system that I would never say to you, oh, you give us GEO or we're not doing this. I mean, we're not participating. Good luck with getting people in that place because I'm not going to put them there. No, I mean, I would never say that. I mean, because I feel strongly about this concept. I mean, I feel very strongly about our need to address issues that a lot of our people have in the system so that we're not doing what I just did before I came down here. I had a guy on a violation who flunked out of Renaissance Crossroads. What do I do with him? I didn't have any other place to put him other than to send him to the state prison. I had, we had gone down a certain path with him. He was not receptive to going on a state intermediate punishment sentence. So my only other real option was to send him to the state prison. So he goes to the state prison for 15 months, he'll get out and we'll be no further ahead with him, And that's something that we face frequently.
I certainly appreciate your attitude. I guess that's an okay word to use in this case, because it makes it a whole lot easier for us to deliberate and come to an amicable solution. And if I were PA Crossroads, hearing your concerns, I would hire somebody who used to work for GEO and get them involved in getting them up and started.
Well, I'm not trying to make your life harder, but I'm also not trying to make it necessarily easier.
That's good.
Well, I would just show my hand a bit that I will have real difficulty voting for a day reporting center if the vendor has to be GEO at their costs and the implications of their contract. So that's where I am.
I appreciate that.
Can I ask a question not related to the selection, just to the day reporting? And so could you, anybody, explain to me how the process of determining who is eligible for day reporting would go? It sounds to me like an MDJ could make that determination at arraignment, or it could be made at, the first appearance before a judge.
It could be made in the prison. Maybe somebody goes to jail initially because they can't post bail, and maybe we discover, hey, wait a minute, this is a mental health issue. This is a drug and alcohol issue, whatever it may be, and we may pull somebody out of prison once they've even started there because we've identified issues that they have that we believe we can address in the day reporting center. So I think there's a multitude of places where you can.
So it doesn't have to be
determination
at the junction of some adjudication. It doesn't have to be, well, if it didn't happen at arraignment, it's going to have to wait until pre-trial, or I don't know. Maybe Dave wants to chime in too.
That's where having a person that's going to be able to navigate those individuals through the system is going to come into play. So, for example, when we talked about the pretrial diversion grant, we would have somebody at central booking that would be doing the assessments and making a determination based on the offense that the person's in for, and the risk and needs assessment, whether or not they would meet the criteria to go into the day reporting center. So we could divert them from central booking. But even that being said, that's something that the district attorney has to be, you have to have someone who coordinating that person, a caseworker, so probation officer, who's contacting the district attorney, making sure that they're okay with the person being placed on whatever bail or bail, that you have to have the MDJ on board with being willing to give that person R bail. I mean, that's for the circumstances related to like the pretrial, the individuals that are going to be on pretrial. Domestic relations, that's going to be something that Judge Charles, and I know Judge Charles, we had conversations about it, so I know he's very supportive of it, that he would have to be willing to use the day reporting center as an alternative to prison for the domestic relations.
Well, I'm sorry, but let's say a guy comes before Judge Charles for not paying support and he has an employment issue. Well, there's going to be an employment assistance component to this where Judge Charles could logically say, okay, you're going to go to the day reporting center and you're going to be part of that employment assistance program. They're going to help you perhaps get some skills, but maybe help you write a resume or whatever it is that you need to do so that I don't have to put you down at the prison and get nowhere with this, but rather we address the issue that you have, which is you need to have a job to pay this support.
But there will be, that will be done at a disposition hearing with Judge Charles.
Yeah.
Now, the one thing that, the one type of referral would not necessarily include a disposition would be violators. So if we have probation violators or parole violators, instead of us putting them in jail, as long as there isn't anything in a court order that prohibits us from doing that, we could make the referral. That would be like the step before they end up in prison. We could make the referral, you're gonna have to go to the day reporting center.
And that's addressed in this study.
We originally wanted to make it a decision by September 1st, I believe. Do you want to push it out?
Well, in September, I think what I heard was make a decision in September, so that there would be time to get up and running beginning of 17.
So do you want to reconvene in 2 weeks?
Okay.
Objection to that?
Yeah.
We'll make sure your calendar's good.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
All right, Judge. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you all for your input and your attendance. Thank you.
So,
And-
Go ahead.
You want me to read the whole